Zach, thanks for changing my name. I'm in my daughter's room, so it said her name on there.
Yeah.
So I wanted everybody to know I'm here.
And I know we are recording. We've got about a minute before the official start time. I think that what I'd like to do before we actually start the hearing is just, I know people have signed in to testify. Let's do a quick mic check just to make sure that we can hear people. So Pamela, would you go just...
Hello.
Would you talk just a little bit longer? That really seemed to break up on my end.
Hi, I'm here. I hope you can hear that.
Okay, that was much better. Thank you.
All right.
And Brandy, you're just next in the list here.
Yeah, I can, my mic should be on. Can you guys hear me?
Hear you fine. Great.
Great.
Thank you. And Mark Grentz, I think you're still muted, sir.
Yep.
Oh,
I'm Mark Grentz. I'm with Multitech. I'm the project engineer, work with Brandy.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see, Brandon, is your mic on?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Very well, thank you.
Great.
Alan Rasmussen, if you're there, would you just do a mic check for me, please? I think you might be muted. Or you might be on the second. Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Jennifer Scott.
Good evening. This is Jennifer Scott. I'm with the Public Works Department.
Thank you. And Lori Souza.
Lori is calling in, so it's a little bit different than the Zoom application. And Lori, you'll need to unmute yourself on your phone.
Okay.
I think, or no, she's on her phone. But I know Lori was going to watch via YouTube, which I know there is a lag because she doesn't have a computer that can do both.
Okay.
Yeah, she's part of the second hearing. So
Okay.
Yes.
Good. So why don't we, it is 5:31. We'll go ahead and we do have two hearings tonight. This is November 18, 2020. It is about 5:32 p.m. I'm the City of Salem's hearings officer, Jim Brewer. We have two hearings tonight. We have CU VAR 20-07 for 4195 Umsville Highway Southeast. And we have CU 20-08 for 5775 Commercial Street Southeast. I will have some procedural things that I'll need to do for both hearings. That includes kind of walking through the order of proceedings, giving people some statutory notices. So let's just start with that. Due to the pandemic, in order to comply with social distancing measures in place to help stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus, this hearing is going to be held digitally, and people who wish to testify orally must have signed in with the recording secretary prior to 3:00 p.m. today. The order of tonight's proceedings are going to be a staff report first, to be presented by Pamela Cole. The applicant's presentation, which should be limited to 15 minutes. A neighborhood report, if any, limited to 10 minutes. Then we'll move into general testimony. We'll ask everybody who testifies to give their name and address so that the recording can pick it up. And so I can keep it in my notes. We'll take testimony in favor of the application, and people speaking in favor is going to be limited to 5 minutes each. Testimony in opposition, also limited to 5 minutes each. Testimony that's neutral, we'll limit that to 5 minutes. Then we'll have rebuttal by the applicant, which would be limited in scope to issues raised in opposition. If we don't have any opposition testimony, then there's no rebuttal. Then we'll likely close the public hearing. At the end of the process, the applicant gets 7 days to provide additional written argument. This isn't an opportunity to provide new evidence, facts, or documents, other than an argument regarding information that's already in the record. The applicant has the burden of proof, so the applicant gets the last word. I want to direct your attention to the applicable criteria that are found in the notice. Testimony and evidence for the public hearing should be directed towards these criteria. For the conditional use, pursuant to SRC 240.005 sub D, an application for a conditional use permit shall be granted if the following criteria are met. A, the proposed use is allowed as a conditional use in the zone. B, the reasonably likely adverse impacts of the use on the immediate neighborhood can be minimized through the imposition of conditions. And C, the proposed use will be reasonably compatible with and have minimal impact on the livability or appropriate development of surrounding property. Pursuant for the variance also associated with this application pursuant to SRC 265.020 A, conditions may be imposed on zone changes, including limits on uses permitted in any development standards. Pursuant to SRC 265.020 B, conditions imposed shall be construed and enforced in all respects as provisions of the zoning code relating to use and development of land. Modification of use conditions shall be by zone change as provided under the chapter. Modification of all other conditions, including full or partial release from conditions, shall be by variance as provided under SRC 245. SRC 245.005A provides that unless otherwise provided in the UDC, buildings, structures, or land shall not be developed contrary to the applicable development standards of the UDC unless a variance has been granted pursuant to that chapter. SRC Chapter 245.005D states that an application for a variance shall be granted if all of the following criteria are met. 1, there is an unreasonable hardship or practical difficulty created by the physical characteristics of the land. 2, the variance will not result in adverse effects that are unreasonably detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare, or to property or improvements in the vicinity. Now, this is the time that we need to kind of give some statutory warnings to the applicant and to people who are testifying. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or the other parties the opportunities to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. So if there's a point you want to make, this is the time to raise it, or you may waive being able to raise it ever again. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. So again, if there's a point that you want to raise about the conditions, the applicant needs to raise those now. I do want to ask anybody who's out there, and you can use the hand raise or just open up your camera. Are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds on the holding of this hearing? Meaning that this isn't the right format. This is not the kind of thing that should come in front of the hearings officer. I'm not seeing any cameras suddenly turn on or microphones go off, so we'll move on. This is CU VAR 20-07 4195 Amsville Highway Southeast. And I may need, yeah, that's right. May we have the staff report, Ms. Cole?
Good evening. I'm Pamela Cole, Planner 2 with Community Development. I'd like to request that the staff report attachments, case file, and presentation be entered into the record.
And they will be. Thank you.
The proposal includes a conditional use for future multifamily development and a variance to allow a future driveway on the section of Joseph Street Southeast that's inside the urban growth boundary. The property is 15 acres. It's located inside the urban growth boundary and the city limits with Joseph Street Southeast, a local street on the north, and Almsville Highway Southeast, a minor arterial on the south. The northwestern area is near the intersection with Deer Park Drive Southeast, which is a collector, and Kubler Boulevard's a parkway. It's about a mile northwest. The property is now zoned industrial commercial. Mill Creek Corporate Center is zoned employment center. Several properties at the intersection of Kubler and Turner are also industrial commercial. Corbin University is public and private educational services and public and private health services. The nearby properties in Marion County are designated special agriculture, shown here at the SA, and acreage residential in AR. The property is located near residential, agricultural, and institutional uses. So other than Corbin, we have Department of Corrections facilities and also the Marion County complex on Almsville Highway, which includes a bus stop. Amazon and Home Depot distribution centers are to the northwest. The city limits boundary runs along the northern side of Joseph Street Southeast on part of this section of the frontage, and the urban growth boundary runs along the southern side of Joseph Street Southeast, which is an unusual situation. The subject property is undeveloped currently. Homes on large parcels are located outside the city limits to the north and the east, and there are some agricultural uses further east. The property has large firs, Oregon white oaks, and other trees, and tree removal is subject to requirements of SRC Chapter 808 and also conditions of the previous land use decision, which was comprehensive plan change, zone change, and urban growth area preliminary declaration 1804. The approximate locations of proposed driveways are shown here with red arrows. And then the preliminary site plan at this point, just wanted to state again that we're not reviewing all the details of the site plan for the apartments, the parking lot, the commercial building right now. That would be part of the site plan review application that would come after the conditional use. So that's going to be postponed until conditional use approval, if that is what is going to occur. So the preliminary would show up to 294 apartments and approximately 561 parking spaces. The green arrow indicates the location of the driveway on Joseph Street Southeast that requires the variance. Blue areas indicate other proposed driveways on Almsville Highway Southeast, and the purple arrow would be a suggested driveway location from Public Works based on driveway spacing that's allowed on Almsville Highway Southeast. The driveway there with the purple arrow would be approximately 485 feet from the western driveway, about 370 feet from the start of the curve that would affect site distance, and about 1,200 feet from the eastern driveway on Almsville. As the applicant mentioned, there are slopes on the property. They're quite significant. The elevations rise about 150 feet from the northwest to the east. The darker green areas indicate mapped landslide hazard points with a value of 2 points, and the lighter green are areas with 3 landslide hazard points. The red arrows again indicate proposed driveway locations, and the purple arrow indicates the driveway location suggested by Public Works. I took pictures of the site where the driveway would be located for the variance. So in this composite of my photos, the intersection of Joseph Street with Almsville Highway is at the right, and then the road up the hill toward the proposed driveway location is on the left. And the preliminary plan that we saw shows that this area would be developed with a commercial building. This composite view is looking down the hill from approximately where the proposed driveway location would be, which is at the bend in the curve on the left. So approximately in the center of the photo on the left would be the proposed driveway location, and this is looking downhill towards Mill Creek Corporate. This is looking the other direction, so up the hill towards some of the residences that are on the north side of Joseph Street shown on the left side of this photo. So testimony that we'd received up until the time I had to finish writing the report and the presentation this afternoon, we received a note from Southeast Mill Creek Association yesterday, and they say that they support the land use action as submitted by the applicant. Earlier, we'd received questions and comments from a few citizens, and one of their notes was that the parking wouldn't be adequate. At that point, there was just a typo on the site plan. So we did include a revised version of the site plan with the accurate parking count, and it does show sufficient parking based on code requirements. A request that we received from 2 different citizens this afternoon was possibly to reduce the density. So in comparison to what we would have for an RM2 multiple family zone, which allows 12 to 28 units per acre, the proposed density is about 22 units per acre on the area that would be devoted to the apartment use. And the applicants, the citizens that commented said that they would support the Joseph Street driveway as long as there wouldn't be other changes on Joseph Street. When we look back at the conditions from the comp plan zone change and urban growth area declaration, though, if a driveway is placed on Joseph Street, that triggers several other conditions on the property frontage on Joseph Street. First, there'd be a right-of-way dedication of a 30-foot half-width where Joseph Street is inside and outside the urban growth boundary. Where Joseph Street's inside the urban growth boundary, we'd have a 3/4 local street improvement, which would be 15 feet from center line on the development side and 12 feet from center line on the opposite side. Where Joseph Street's outside the urban growth boundary, there'd be a 30-foot wide linking street improvement required. And if the applicant wanted to pursue the driveway and try to eliminate some of these conditions, there would be additional variances needed. The citizens also requested another driveway on Almsville Highway. So as we showed, the applicant's already proposing 2 driveways on Almsville Highway, and Public Works had a suggested location for a 3rd driveway. The applicant, sorry, I keep saying that. The citizens, one of them noted that the applicants had discussed potentially having apartments behind trees that were near Joseph Street, but that preliminary plan that I showed earlier indicated that buildings would be replacing those trees. So they requested potentially having a condition for a thick hedgerow of trees and shrubs in that area to provide additional screening, and also really would like us to retain as many or all of the existing trees in the area. The staff has no issue if the applicant would accept a condition for a hedgerow, and we already have conditions that require maximizing retention of the existing trees and the setbacks that would abut Joseph Street. There was a request for speed bumps or speed humps on Joseph Street, and we discussed that with Public Works this afternoon, and we're told that they would not be allowed because the vertical grade in that section exceeds 8%. It's approximately 10%. There was also a request to restrict parking on Joseph Street to families that have existing properties there, but it would be a public street and we don't restrict parking to particular people on public streets. It would be available to any vehicles that can legally be parked on the street. There was also a request for lighting designed by a professional engineer. Code prohibits lighting that shines or reflects onto adjacent properties or casts glare on the right-of-way. As far as agency comments, we received a comment from Chariot saying that they oppose the conditional use because of the distance from transit routes. Typically, apartments can be fairly high users of transit. And in this case, the nearest bus stop at the Marion County complex is about 3,000 feet to the northwest, can be reached via Almsville Highway, by vehicle, by bike lane, or sidewalk. Salem Kaiser Schools commented, and this one was also a little unusual, that this property, which is close to the urban growth boundary and city limits is actually in the Cascade School District, which has headquarters in Turner, and students eligible for bus transport. I discussed that with some representatives over in the school district in the Cascade School District. Staff found that the proposal with the conditions that we're suggesting would meet the criteria for a conditional use. The conditions would minimize the impact on the neighborhood, and the use would be reasonably compatible with and have minimal impact on livability or appropriate development of the surrounding property. For the variance, it's a little more complicated. We did find that the application did not contain sufficient detail that shows that the driveway on Almsville is not possible. So a little history on this for those of you who weren't involved in the comp plan zone change and UGA application previously. The variance was required as a condition of that decision. When that application was submitted, the transportation planning rule analysis evaluated a likely mix of uses that could be established in the industrial commercial zone, which would include housing, retail, offices, commercial, and light industrial. The conditions prohibited driveways on Joseph Street to reduce transportation impacts on the under-improved street. And that was based on comments that we'd received from the neighbors. The applicant stated that the steep slopes would make the access on Almsville Highway difficult and that this variance is necessary for adequate and safe access to the complex. And as I mentioned, we found that we needed more evidence from the applicant to prove that they cannot provide the Almsville Highway driveway safely. Staff did find that the potential multifamily development would generate less traffic than many of the other possible uses in the industrial commercial zone, and the driveway on the lower portion of Joseph Street near the northwest end of the property would not be unreasonably detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare. So we found that it did meet the second criterion, but not the first. Therefore, staff's recommending denial of the variance, but approval of the conditional use with the conditions here. And just wanted to make a note that there were typos in the staff report in two places where we had southern property line there, but the condition actually applies to the eastern property line, which abuts the acreage residential zone. So the other condition, other than fence of a material other than chain link, would be that the multifamily use would contain the number of units shown on the preliminary plan, which is no more than 294 units. So that concludes my presentation. Of course, I am available to answer your questions.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. This has kind of a complicated relationship between the city limit and the UGB.
Yes.
So at the point where the driveway variance is being requested, is all of Joseph within the city limits?
At that point, yes.
Okay.
So city limits line is on the north side of Joseph in the section that's east of the driveway. But at the proposed driveway location, the driveway and that section of Joseph are in the city limits and inside the UGB.
Okay. And other than, and that it's a big other, because the slope exceeds 8%, the design standard wouldn't allow speed humps or speed bumps along Joseph. Is that also in this area, or are we talking about the length of Joseph?
I believe that the way that the testimony was written was that they were more concerned about what would happen east of the driveway. And I sent the full document to Tony Martin, the assistant traffic engineer, and he just stated that the slope exceeds the 8%. It's about 10% in this area. So I'm not sure exactly where he measured.
And so we're going to, of course, accept the additional comments that were submitted into the record. And I think I have both of the ones that you received on this.
Yes.
Actually, are there three? There's
Simca sent comments in yesterday, which I believe we forwarded to you. And today we received comments from Tom Black and AJ Acker.
That's it. Okay, very good. Let me see if I've got another. As usual, your report's very thorough, and I had some questions which you've already resolved. Back to the proposed driveway that Public Works indicated could be on the additional one on Almsville Highway. Was their idea that would be instead of the proposed driveway on Joseph?
Yes.
Was it just an indication that, yeah, you could add an additional driveway there?
Yes, it was in place of the one that would require the variance.
Okay. And on the parking, I think that you've addressed that if that is a public street, it's a public street for all of the uses for a public street, and that includes parking. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And with that, would the applicant like to make a presentation?
I would. I can't get my video going. It
I
looks.
can hear you very well.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry about that. For some reason, it says the host has stopped my video. So if you don't mind not seeing me, I guess. Hey, Pam.
I've changed the settings, so you should be able to.
Okay, let me try that.
I think.
It's not letting me go. Oh, Pam, that's the map I was just going to ask you to put up. The other one with our layout.
The layout. Okay.
So that one, please. Thank you. All right.
And I do see you now. So.
Great. Well, good evening. My name is Brandy Dalton. I'm with Multi-Tech Engineering, and we're located at 1155 Southeast 13th Street, Salem, Oregon, 97302. I'm here tonight representing the applicant. The applicant is on for the hearing as well, along with Mark Grins, just in case you have questions for the applicant or an engineer. Pam did do a very thorough job on the staff report, and we appreciate that. We've been working with Pam for a while on this project. So there's a few things that I want to touch on. This is a conditional use. We're looking to do multifamily. And so we submitted a concept plan originally that did not have the correct parking. And then Pam, thank you for including the corrected site plan with the 536 parking spaces. So that's what you'll be seeing. We are aware that since we'll be proposing apartments, that the next step will be site plan review, and then we can look at design standards with that. We have reviewed the conditions of approval. We understand that there's a density cap, condition number 2, and we're good with that. I also wanted to touch on a couple things that Pam received from applicants. One is the hedge. The applicant would not support a hedge along the development at all. Per the comp plan zone change, we're already required to do a 30-foot landscaping strip. And within that, there should be more than adequate landscaping and buffer. So we would not support a condition for a hedge of any kind. Density, the condition 2 deals with density. And as far as chariots go, we really can't control where chariots goes. The more development you get out here, though, the more likely you have that eventually bus service will come out that way. But for now, we can't control that. So Pam also touched upon the fact that there's a variance with this conditional use. We did request the variance because it allowed us to, per the condition number 5 of comp plan zone change. We do feel that we met all the criteria to warrant approval for a variance. Joseph Street is the lower street classification, which code typically prefers you to use. The shape, the size of the shape of the lot and the topography of the lot create a practical difficulty with certain areas along Almsville Highway, providing a driveway. So we felt that Joseph Street, being the lowest classification and providing access in another area of the development, provided more efficient circulation. But we do understand the reason for the denial, the comp plan zone change, neighbors and public works concerns. So with that being said, I've talked to our engineer, Mark Grins, and he will be looking at the site to see if it is possible to provide another driveway where you suggest it, where it says suggested driveway location. He'll look at the layout and the topography and see if that can work, and do a little maneuvering. So we do understand the reason for the denial. So I just wanted to throw some additional information out there for you regarding that. But with all that being said, really Mark and I are here to answer any questions you might have. So that concludes anything I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Let me just ask a couple of questions, maybe related to the proposed driveway and that variance. And I certainly take your point about Joseph being the lower street classification, the code language that recommends that. The shape, I guess there is a pinch point just about where the proposed driveway is.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a feel for what the distance is from Joseph to Almsville Highway at kind of that narrowest point?
You know, I don't have that in front of me. I'm not sure if Mark knows, but I don't have that information in front of me. So I don't know that. I apologize.
I think there are scales on here, and so that's part of the record, and I could probably figure that out. If you knew it off the top of your head, then
Yeah, I'm so sorry, I don't.
And so let's talk about the hedge for just a minute. Is there a minimum amount of trees that'll have to be planted in that buffer yard there?
There will be, per the landscaping code, and they actually have new requirements that multifamily requires more landscaping than previous. And in the comp plan zone change, I think it's outlined that additional landscaping is required. Pam might be able to outline a little bit more what's going to be required per the new code. And that's something that at the time of site plan review, we'll have to submit our landscaping plans, and we'll be able to work with Pam, and adjacent property owners will get notification of that. So we're willing to work with staff on that. It's just a hedge just is something that doesn't make sense to go out there. For us, it doesn't.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Anything else from the applicant?
That's it for me.
Okay, well, I know you have the applicant, Mr. Grins, online too. If they want to say something, I'll give you an opportunity to do that. I think we're still in our 15 minutes. Not required to.
He's shy.
Just to try to answer your question on that proposed access point, it's about 750 feet. from Almsville Highway by the along the if you travel from Almsville Highway along Joseph Street along the center line, it's about 750 feet.
Yeah.
Where we had that driveway proposed.
Yeah, I got that in terms of the distance around. I was really thinking of what is the distance across the property at that pinch point.
Oh, across that property at that point, it's about 180 feet. Give or take a little bit.
Okay. Just thinking about it in terms of challenges with the property shape. So. That'll give me something to consider there. Thank you. That was useful.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of topography difference between as you travel up the site along Almsville Highway, and so getting an access with what we try to do, which is to get ADA access, at the pedestrian access at the same point, is very difficult to do along that lower part of the large parcel from Almsville Highway. Now, it's not impossible, but it's difficult. And whereas if the grades on Joseph Street, we basically came right out onto what would be the street design in there without having grade differences. But as Brandy indicated, we already knew that this was an issue, and I started looking at it, and we'll likely be able to come up with another access point, but our pedestrian access probably won't be able to be at the same point. We'll have to find an alternate place for pedestrians so that we can create an accessible route, probably with some ramps and some switchbacks like you see in order to get up there.
Okay.
But that's why we picked that location on Joseph and felt that the comp plan zone change essentially, although it said not to, but it essentially said we could. It's a little bit difficult for us to have sorted it out quite the way we should have, I guess. But we'll figure out how to make that work. So,
okay. Well, thank you. That's very useful. Anything else from the applicant?
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Alan Rasmussen with Cascade Legacy Properties. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you.
Okay. I just there was a few points that I wanted to point out in regards, first on that hedge. One of the additional reasons we see that as unneeded is along in that 30-foot buffer that would be created, there's quite a few white oaks that will remain, that those neighbors across the way that are in the county would love to see stay, which they will. So, building a hedge and fencing around oak trees it seems unnecessary. The other, and Mark pointed out, I was going to point out that the reason of the proposed driveway location was that was much better for accessibility reasons, but he pointed that out. Also, in regards to chariots, I thought that comment was very befuddling on their part. They're only about 3,000 feet down the road, and I know they're looking at their routing in that area and revising it. It'd make a lot of sense for them to come up, turn south on Deer Park, and then turn back west on Turner, and then be back on Corden. That's about a 3-mile addition that would start serving the university, and then it would be serving some of those new properties being built along Turner Road and then back on Corden in the Mill Creek. So I found that comment a little befuddling.
It's a little chicken and egg, isn't it? That they would like the development to go where the bus routes are, but once development is in place, bus routes can move to where development is. So I take your point.
Yeah, and then this is something that we pointed out all along this case is a lot of the citizen comments. I would just question if that's coming from City of Salem citizens or outside the city, and where those comments are coming from. But again, the proposed driveway, we just thought that, and to wrap it up, we just thought that was a much safer exit out and then down to a nice developed intersection that's there on Deer Park and Almsville Highway.
Okay. Thank you. With that, we'll move to general testimony. Again, I'll ask people to be sure to state their name and give their address so that the recording picks it up. Do we have anyone who would like who has signed in who would like to testify in favor of the application?
Everyone who is present is part of an application being heard tonight, so I don't believe we have anyone to provide public commentary.
Okay, well, we'll bounce through these anyway, giving people who aren't there a chance. Do we have any testimony in opposition? Looks like no. Do we have any neutral testimony? Doesn't look like it. That means that the applicant does not get rebuttal. Do you want, I will ask the applicant, do you want your additional 7 days for final written argument?
No, we don't. I don't believe we need it.
Okay, so we're going to waive that. With that, we'll close the hearing. And it will take me probably probably 10 days to, and I think we got a holiday in here, to get a written decision out. I've got a couple of things that I need to take a look at. But thank you for your testimony tonight. It's very useful to me as I was looking at the application to hear those perspectives and those points. And I've got a couple of things I need to, sounds like I need to address. So with that, we'll close this hearing and we will move to the next one. And let me get my...
At this point, if anyone associated with the first case would like to leave, you're welcome to do so. But you can also stick around if you want.
Of course. Let's see. And this should be CU 20-08, I believe.
That is correct.
Okay, so it's now 6:10 p.m. I'm still Jim Brewer. I'm still the hearings officer for the city of Salem. We're going to go through exactly the same kind of process. Due to the pandemic, in order to comply with social distancing measures in place to help stop the spread of COVID-19 virus, this hearing will be held digitally. People who wish to testify orally must have signed in with the recording secretary prior to 3 p.m. today. The order of tonight's proceedings will be a staff report, first to be presented by Brandon Pike. Applicant's presentation, once again limited to 15 minutes. A neighborhood report, if any, limited to 10 minutes. We'll move to general testimony. Again, we'll ask people who are going to testify to give their name and address so the recording picks it up. Testimony in favor of the application will come first, limited to 5 minutes a person. Testimony in opposition will come second, limited to 5 minutes a person. Testimony that's neutral, also subject to that 5-minute limitation. Then we'll go to rebuttal by the applicant, limited in scope to issues raised in opposition. And again, at the end of the process, the applicant gets 7 days to provide additional written argument. It's not an opportunity to provide new evidence, facts, or documents other than an argument regarding information already in the record. And after that, we'll close the hearing and I'll move to a decision at some point. I do want to direct everyone's attention to the applicable criteria found in the notice. The testimony and evidence for the public hearing must be directed towards these criteria. For conditional use pursuant to SRC 240.005 sub D, an application for a conditional use permit shall be granted if the following criteria are met. A, the proposed use is allowed as a conditional use in the zone. B, the reasonably likely adverse impacts of the use on the immediate neighborhood can be minimized through the imposition of conditions. And C, the proposed use will be reasonably compatible with and have minimal impact on the livability or appropriate development of surrounding property. Once again, I have some statutory warnings to give to people. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or other parties the opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeals to the State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. If there's a point you want to make, this is the time and place to do it, or you may waive it and not be able to raise it later. To the applicant, the failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. So if you have a problem with the conditions, this is the time and place to bring those up. Once again, to anyone who is listening, are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds, meaning that I'm not the right person to be making this decision? It shouldn't be in front of the hearings officer. I'm not seeing anybody waving me down, so we'll go ahead and continue. This is CU 20-08 5775 Commercial Street Southeast. Mr. Pike, may we have the staff report, please?
Good evening. My name is Brandon Pike. I'm a Planner 1 with the Community Development Department, and I'm here to discuss conditional use case number 20-08. At this time, I would like to request that the staff report, attachments, and this presentation be entered into the record.
And they will be. Thank you.
The applicant is proposing a new mixed-use building at an existing commercial development. The proposal calls for the building to contain approximately 71 dwelling units, along with some commercial uses. Multiple family uses in the CR zone require a conditional use permit, so that's why we're here tonight.
Do you have a slideshow that we're supposed to be seeing? We may need to adjust the screens here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you not seeing?
I am not.
No, you'll need to share it again.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was showing me. I apologize for that. Okay, so you're seeing.
We're seeing the request.
There we go.
No, now we're seeing both slides, but okay, that's good.
There it is. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so the conditional use permit. I already went over that, so we'll move on to the application history here. So the application was filed in August and deemed complete in October. The state mandated 120-day decision deadline is February 24th of next year. The applicant and staff have met procedural requirements. Here's a vicinity map of the subject property and surrounding area. The property is approximately 2.9 acres in size and is part of a larger development, which is around 6.9 acres in size, which you can see in the orange here. The development site has street frontage on both Commercial Street Southeast to the east and Wiltsey Road Southeast to the south. Commercial Street is a major arterial and Wiltsey is a collector. Also, Waln Creek, shown here in blue, passes through the southwestern and western portions of the subject property. Here's a zoning map of the vicinity. The subject property is zoned CR or retail commercial. It abuts CG zoned land to the north. It's RM2 and CG land across Commercial Street to the east, and it abuts RM2 land to the south, where there are multiple existing multiple family developments to the south, and it abuts IC zone land to the west with an existing self-service storage facility. Other properties in the vicinity you can see are zoned similarly, along with some RD or residential duplex, as well as a little bit of RA or residential agriculture. Here's a 2019 aerial photo of the site with the subject property shown in yellow, and then the larger development site is mostly shown surrounding it here. There are 3 existing buildings at the development site with existing commercial uses. There's no residential uses currently at the site. The proposed development would occupy this southwestern portion of the site, which is currently undeveloped, except for a small portion containing parking and a drive aisle. And then it has, of course, Wallen Creek and some vegetation and trees along the creek there. Here's the subject property as it looks today, the vacant portion of it looking northwest, and you can see one of the existing buildings over on the right side of that photo on the development site. And looking southwest, kind of that same area. This is the preliminary site plan for the proposal that the applicant submitted. The applicant has not submitted an application for site plan review, so these plans are subject to change at the time of development. And we'll talk about this more in the coming slides, but note that in the preliminary plan, the applicant has called for the building to be located near the center of the property here, with parking area and a drive aisle here, located immediately adjacent to the creek. So staff found that the proposal meets the conditional use approval criteria and as follows. So multiple family uses are allowed with conditional use approval in the CR zone. Also the South Gateway Overlay Zone, which the property or a portion of the subject property is within. That overlay zone does not prohibit the proposed use. The reasonable likely adverse impacts of the use on the immediate neighborhood can be minimized through the imposition of conditions as described in the staff report. And then finally, as described in the staff report, as conditioned, we believe the proposed multifamily use will be reasonably compatible with and have minimal impact on the livability or appropriate development of surrounding property. In terms of testimony, the neighborhood association and neighboring property owners and tenants did not submit any comments. No city departments had concerns with the proposed conditional use permit. They'll review it for conformance with their standards at the time of development. The school district noted that the development would be eligible for school or bus transportation. It's located more than a mile from most of their schools, and that adequate transportation infrastructure should be provided for the proposed use, which again, that will be ensured at the time of development. Staff recommends approval of the request with the following conditions summarized here. Because the proposed mixed-use building is not within a zone that would require design review for either the multifamily use nor for the building itself. It's not in a zone that has design standards for the building. This development will not be subject to design review at the time of development. So we wanted to ensure that the development, once it does come in for site plan review approval, meets the intent of the Salem Revised Code for multifamily uses, as well as mixed use developments, as well as meets the approval criteria for a conditional use permit. So, these conditions then are related to the building and to the site design. And they include putting a cap on the number of dwelling units allowed to match what the applicant has proposed, an open space requirement based on the number of units built, required windows for the dwelling units, a required building offset or articulation on the mixed-use building, a condition related to the location of the building in relation to the creek, and weather protection or awnings required along the ground floor commercial uses. After the conditions of approval had been shared with the applicant's representative and after the staff report had been sent out, the applicant and their representative provided written testimony asking the hearings officer to remove condition 5 from the decision related to the location of the building in relation to Walton Creek. Staff notes the applicant's desire to provide gated parking for the residents of the mixed-use building. But instead of striking condition 5 from the decision, we believe the preliminary plans can be modified to still meet condition 5 while providing the gated parking area still for the residents. For instance, the building could be designed in a more square shape, occupying the southwestern portion of the site with the creek to the south and to the west. And gated parking could still be provided to the north of the proposed building. Staff acknowledges the creek as a natural amenity, and the conditional use approval criteria requires us to ensure the reasonable likely adverse impacts of the use on the immediate neighborhood can be minimized through the imposition of conditions. Condition 5 would allow for greater preservation of the riparian zone along Walton Creek. It would be a green space between the creek and the building instead of a parking lot. And this would ensure the adverse impacts from the proposal on the immediate neighborhood would be minimized. And I'm sorry, and with that is the conclusion of my presentation, and I'm here for any questions.
Okay, can we, and maybe this is a good slide to start on. So the use that's across the creek there, is that like a self-storage?
It is, that's correct.
Okay, and could you go to the slide that I think is looking at the creek line or the tree line along the creek? Yeah, okay.
There's that one and then this one.
Okay, yeah. So as I read the applicant's comments on condition 5, it seemed like one of the concerns had to do with site security as much as anything else. Does staff have a take on that perspective?
We reviewed their comments that they sent in yesterday. And I mean, in our eyes, having the building closer to the creek, along with the other condition that requires windows in the dwelling units facing the common areas and parking areas and pedestrian paths and all that, it would still provide a lot of security for that area, we think.
So really thinking eyes on.
Correct.
Eyes on the creek, additional.
Right. Yeah. In our eyes, it would be a better use of the space to have it. I don't know what the developer would want to do, if they'd want to put in patios or a common open space, which again, that's another one of the recommended conditions. But yeah, a usable space that would include active and passive recreational opportunities for the residents, but also just kind of maybe a little bit of a viewpoint for the residents, so that there would always be eyes on the space.
And is there a required setback from the riparian?
There is no minimum setback specifically to the creek. We just have, in terms of zoning standards, we just have protections for the trees and vegetation.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Does the applicant wish to make a presentation?
I do. Brandon, can you put up the site plan for me, please?
Sure.
Good evening. My name is Brandy Dalton. I'm with Multi-Tech Engineering at 1155 Southeast 13th Street, Salem, Oregon, 97302. Again, Mark Grins is with me tonight. He will be speaking after me. We've reviewed the staff report. It is a conditional use for a mixed use, and Brandon did a thorough job in the staff report. All the conditions are fine except condition number 5. We would like condition 5 eliminated. The applicant, I felt, provided a really great detailed letter. This is what they do. So Brandon's comments stating that the city thinks this would work and thinks this is what you can do, that's all it is thinking it might work. We're dealing with applicants that this is what they do, and we've been working on this design for this building for over a year to make it safe for residents, make sure it's efficient, works for commercial uses, and fits the site. So to make comments that you think it can work, it doesn't necessarily work in another way. And you're talking about going back to the drawing board for something that really isn't necessary. There's a couple things I want to touch on based on moving the parking. First of all, there's parking out front of the building for the commercial uses, adequate parking. The parking in the back, what this does is it helps provide a safe, monitored, gated parking for the residents. Moving it doesn't necessarily do that. This is a design that works for the applicant, and they want their residents to feel safe and have that buffer from the storage unit. You move the building closer to the creek, you're not really gaining any more open space, as Brandon said, because it's going to be right there where the parking was. And they're going to be looking at a storage facility. So I guess we're struggling with the purpose of condition 5. I feel like that's something that a condition that really shouldn't be part of the staff report. Another thing is fire access. This provides adequate fire access to the back of the building, which is very important as well. So it's something that I hope is thought about when you're looking at making a decision, that we would really like to see condition 5 go away. We feel we have a great design and setup for this proposed development, and we feel that eliminating condition 5 and approving the conditional use is warranted. I know Mark wanted to talk, so I'm going to stop so he can have the rest of the time.
Ask one question first.
Go for it.
And that has to do with the fire access. If this is gated, secured parking, does it work as fire access?
It does. Yes, they will have access to the gate. They will. And that's how it works for developments like this. So, okay. Yep. And we'll work with the fire department on that. And that's another thing that happens at building permit time.
Looks like pretty sharp corner there on the one end. Wouldn't want to try to get through there with a very large rig, I wouldn't think. And I'm not sure how the gate works, but thank you.
I'll let Mark go.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes Officer. My name is Mark Brenz, and I'm the project engineer for this. I think it's the history of this particular site is not present with the staff that we have today, because this site was altered back in the 80s. The creek that's there it may appear to be a creek, but it was a man. That particular stretch in that leg along the east and south portions of where we're proposing was dug. It was relocated. The site was filled with material that was removed from the construction of Cooper Boulevard between Sunnyside Road and Lone Oak when that was done. And in fact, there used to be a trunk sewer line that ran parallel to the old creek when it was a creek in there, that's been relocated. If you see on our site plan there, you'll see that underneath that set of parking that's back there is the now present location of the Walm Creek trunk. And so part of what we were accomplishing by the way we set this site up was to provide the city of Salem the required access that they're going to want to those manholes back there in order to maintain that sanitary sewer line. And that if we don't do something like this back there, access to those manholes have to be provided in an alternative way, which is still going to be some sort of hard surface access back there for that. So that won't have changed the outcome. And I know that you looked at that, some of the photos of that site, and other than the fact that there's a few trees back there, it's not exactly what I'd call a pristine waterway. So I'm not seeing what we're trying to preserve back there. This site will have to provide green water infrastructure. So we're going to have to provide stormwater quality facilities on this site in order to meet the current City of Salem's design standards for that. We're going to have to provide some enhanced landscaping back in that area in order to help meet those requirements. And we think we can make this an attractive area. The things that staff was pointing out, we're going to have almost over half of our units will have balconies that face out to the east on this building as we have it set up. And this is a 4-story structure. So on the backside, we have 4 stories of living units that look out that way. So we have a lot of people that are going to be able to take advantage of what we are going to create there, and yet can feel safe, like Brandy pointed out. So we will set this access up that you were talking about with your questions about fire. We go through a process with fire and set up and go and create a turning movement and maneuvering drawing for them that shows how their ladder truck can get through there, and make sure that they're satisfied with where we put our security, our gates, and how we've set up our access in there. And I think it's actually pretty simple here, because if you look on the Wiltsey Road side where our access turns and goes back around on the south side of the building, we can put a gate anywhere down that side and provide the security that the residents need and not interfere with how the fire department gets in there. They'll have an Opticon that'll set up on that gate, so when they come in, it automatically opens for them. And then we can put another gate on the north entrance where we go back out into the commercial area, where it's easy for the fire to maneuver out of it. The gate can swing. We can set up the gate to maneuver and swing in the right way, so it doesn't impede that as well. So I think that we've thought about those types of issues relatively well. The configuration of the building that staff talked about making it more square, well, you can't accommodate the number of units and the uses that we're trying to do in a square building, because of the way you have to provide access to all the living units and then take advantage of the commercial that we're trying to do in here. So this really is this is really thought out. This was not an issue that was brought up to us through any of the pre-apps that we've had on this site. So this is new to us. I realize that pre-apps aren't binding on anybody, but they are intended to provide pitfalls to us that we would have to take into account. Because as the staff noted, we don't have any other process other than the conditional use that we have to go through before we submit construction drawings. And we've moved a long ways in the construction drawing preparation on this because we weren't told that there was any concern like this, and because we can't see where there's any real restrictions that prevent us from doing it. If you want to call it a waterway, it does have a riparian corridor, and the riparian corridor requirements limit what we can remove of natural vegetation and trees, and our plan proposes to not do that. So we have one tree, I think, that's showing in our parking that we've already fixed on our site plan to eliminate, but to prevent. But I don't see, other than some idea of what someone thinks it can be, we think we've done a good job. And in fact, the neighborhood association's lack of comments in this particular area, where there's a huge concern about natural resources and preservation of the natural environment by the neighborhood association that's out here, by their silence and lack of comment would indicate that they don't have an issue with what we're trying to do here. And I think that they believe that what we're proposing is a good fit. We're not going to create any problems for any neighbors to the west of us, because it's storage. So I just don't see where where that condition is justified at all in this particular project. And in fact, it will likely, that imposition would cause us to have to give up units. And that's contrary to the goals that everybody's trying to achieve right now, which is to provide more affordable needed housing in this community. I mean, we have a huge shortfall of housing in the Salem area right now. It's just not possible to grasp how bad it is, even with the restrictions and the impacts that the pandemic has put on us. We cannot build enough living units in this town, whether they're single family or multifamily, to meet the current demand. They fill as fast as and sell as fast as we can get them built right now. So I think this provides an alternative style of living, secure inside, secure outside. So it will meet a different type of housing needs that's not being provided in Salem right now.
Okay. Anything else from the applicant?
No, I think that's it.
Well, sounds like I have some things that I'm going to need to balance. Let me get through the rest of our process here. I take it that we still don't have anybody else signed up.
There's no one else signed up. We do have Lori Souza here, who is also here on behalf of the applicant, but I don't know if they had anything to add or not.
So anything else from the applicant? Don't think so.
This is Brandon. This is Lori Souza. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure when I was supposed to speak.
You can, and Lori, are you with the applicant?
Yes, I am. I work for Bo Rushing, the applicant.
Okay, and if you want to add something, you may. You're not required to.
Sure. No, I would love to speak on behalf of this project. And first of all, thank you for everybody's time. They went over all of this so thoroughly, and we're very excited about being able to put this project out there. We definitely appreciate the thought behind the parking and the creek, but we've been operating on that site for quite a number of years, and we're very familiar with the population around that site and the needs for the different parking. We're very familiar with the creek. I love creeks. I have one in my backyard, but this particular creek, unfortunately, because of that area and because of that self-storage facility behind us, et cetera, it doesn't always attract anything that would make it be a passive or active recreation area. What would end up happening, we're concerned that what would end up happening if we move the building back so it's closer to the creek, or if we have to move that site around at all, it would just make it a narrower, more private waterway that would encourage camping and an increase in traffic in that area, as well as an increase of risk and vulnerability to the residents that would be parking there. I think Mark really definitely addressed our concerns as far as what the best usage of the space and the site. I really appreciate all of Mark's thoughts and comments and Brandy's thoughts and comments on how they designed this site to accommodate secure parking for the residents, as well as available parking for the retail and commercial tenants. So I just wanted to let you know that we appreciate everything, certainly, and we will be happy to abide by whatever the conditions are that the city decides that we need to abide by happily. But we are concerned about that parking, and if we start changing that site around, as Brandy mentioned, it'll put us back to square one as far as design, and we would lose units, as Mark said. So otherwise, just thank you again for your time, and thank you for your consideration on this.
Well, thank you for hanging on with us and giving your thoughts. it looks pretty clear to me like part of what I'm going to need to do is to, and this will be fun, to kind of balance the uh, different perspectives here to come to a decision. And that'll be uh, 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 it's a little unusual for things to be this focused on one condition. So that makes it relatively easy. But I certainly see some competing interests here, and I think I've got a good feel for what they are. Anything else from the applicant?
Not for me, unless Mark or Lori has anything to say.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
I'm going to again go through that kind of very quickly. Is there any other testimony in favor of the applicant? Don't think so. Any testimony in opposition? Not seeing anybody suddenly signing in. Any neutral testimony? Not hearing. That means no rebuttal. Oh wait, I'm seeing.
Mr. Hearings Officer, can I forget if I'm able to offer any kind of like clarifying comments?
I tell you what, I will come back to you in just a minute, because in some ways staff gets to talk to me about things, and since the applicant's still online here anyway, perhaps we can have that conversation. So let's.
Okay, I apologize to interrupt you.
That's fine. Why don't you go ahead at this point, and then we'll let the applicant do a little rebuttal if that's something they want to do. But what?
Okay.
So let's go ahead and make the point that you want to make, Brandon.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mainly just wanted to say this condition 5 and all the conditions were shared with Multitech, the applicant's representative, before we sent out the staff report. And I understand there could be, maybe miscommunication or misunderstanding. But we were, staff was under the impression that one, the plans for the site were very preliminary in nature, that there weren't, construction plans put together for the proposal, because there wasn't a site plan review application in, and that was just the impression we had from them. And then second, I can't, now I'm blanking, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't our intention to spring anything on the applicant or their representative. It was, us trying to meet the approval criteria of the conditions or of the conditional use permit.
This is one of those cases where even professionals can have a disagreement, and that's one of the reasons why we have hearings. So I understood Mr. Grentz's comment. I understand your response to that. I don't think how things worked out on the pre-application is really part of the criteria for this at all. So I understand those, I hear those, but we're going to deal with this matter. I'm sure everybody's conducted themselves in a professional manner. So I think you had another point you wanted to make, and
I think that was it. I appreciate you letting me provide that.
Okay. Anything else from the applicant on that?
Yeah, I did not mean to imply that anybody was behaving unprofessional. I just say it's difficult when we know we don't have to go through a site design process. We have to rely on the information or what we hear or don't hear, if in this case, to go going forward, whether or not that we let staff know that we were in the design phase. But I'm not sure that's the point worth debating. But I I still say that the issues are the same. You know, but given the fact we got to provide fire access, given the fact that there's a sewer trunk line back there, I mean, it's not like it's going to be a nice landscaped area that no one's going to enter into behind. People walk out of their balconies and look at lawn or landscape back to a creek. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
A 4-story building requires fire access on 4 sides.
I certainly take that point. I think you've given me some good things to think about here. So I appreciate those comments. I will ask, does the applicant want that 7 days to provide final written argument?
No.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll close the hearing. Again, this is probably going to take about 10 days for me to get a written decision out. Really, that condition 5 seems to be the bone of contention. I certainly appreciate the staff's perspective that, yeah, here's a natural feature, and we want to think of that as an amenity and as something to protect. I certainly take the applicant's position that in its current state, it is not something that's going to lend itself to active recreational uses. And I see some logic in the way that both the sewer line and the fire access are being handled here. I think I've got to balance some policy direction on this to make a decision. But thank you. The staff did a thorough job. The applicant's done a thorough job of making their point, and I think I can arrive at an informed decision on this. With that, I think we are done for the evening. Is there anything else for the good of the order, Zachary?
I don't believe so. We did originally have a case scheduled on the 2nd, but it's been withdrawn. So we do not have another hearings officer until at least the 16th of December. So.
Okay, very good. Then I hope everybody has a safe Thanksgiving and abides by the governor's order. Fewer than six people, 2 households at max, maybe all virtual. I don't know. And I'll see people in December. These will be out, as I said, in about 10 days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.